Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We're awaiting remarks from President Trump. He's at the winter meeting of the Republican National Committee. The president is scheduled to start speaking at 8:10 tonight from the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. You're looking at pictures of it right there. Of course, we'll take you live when he does. But first, Washington has been in near limbo all day, mesmerized by the promise that the now famous House Intelligence Committee memo will be released at any moment, any second. We don't know when, it turns out. At this point, all we know for certain about the memo is that it's 4 pages long. It was compiled by Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, and as of tonight remains classified and hidden from public view. According to some who have read it, the memo exposes shocking misconduct by our intelligence and law enforcement agencies during the 2016 election, including spying on Americans for political purposes. We can't confirm any of that. Like pretty much everyone else, we have not seen the document, but the charges are strong enough to shake public faith in some of our most important public institutions. And the only way to fix that is to release the memo so the rest of us can see the evidence and decide for ourselves what it amounts to. That's how democracies work. It seems like an obvious solution. In fact, it's the only solution. And yet, for some reason, the prospect of transparency has triggered panic in the Democratic Party and among its Praetorian Guard in the media. Just a year ago, the Washington Post, for example, adopted the pompous and yet indisputably true slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness." Just this week, that paper dismissed the congressional memo as, quote, a hyper-partisan attempt to discredit Mueller. Of course, the Post would have no way of knowing that. They haven't seen the memo. They don't want you to see it either. How did democracy dies in darkness become some things are best kept secret? It turns out that when transparency hurts Democrats, the media oppose transparency. Remember when CNN's Chris Cuomo warned viewers they would be breaking the law simply by reading John Podesta's leaked emails? Well, needless to say, most government bureaucrats agree with the media on this. As The Onion put it today, FBI warns that Republican memo could undermine faith in massive, unaccountable secret government agencies. No surprise there. Most people everywhere would rather avoid accountability if it's at all possible. The federal government's transparency caucus has always been notably small. The question is, are there legitimate reasons to oppose releasing the memo? Reasons that have nothing to do with craven media cheerleading for Democrats or with Adam Schiff's career aspirations. Only 2 legitimate reasons come to mind. Are the contents of the memo provably false and therefore libelous? And would releasing the memo imperil national security? Those are real questions, and so far the answer to both appears to be no. In other words, there is no excuse for withholding this document from the public. Claims to the contrary are partisan barking, and you ought to ignore them. Mark Steyn is an author and columnist, and he joins us tonight. So, Mark, I think the best summary of the argument against this from the federal point of view came out today in The Onion, which quoted an imaginary federal official as saying, and I'm quoting, "If we take away the public's faith in this shadowy monolith, all that's left is an extensive network of rogue, unelected intelligence officers carrying out extrajudicial missions for a variety of subjective and occasionally personal reasons." And we wouldn't want that.
Exactly. And as you noted, the Washington Post has come out against the release of the memo. This is the newspaper that every couple of years Hollywood makes a movie about with Katharine Graham, the late owner, and Ben Bradley, the late editor, said, "Oh, yeah, I'll go to jail. I'll publish this, and I'm prepared to take the risk of going to jail." And Tom Hanks and gets all the looks forward to all the Oscar nominations and all the rest of it. And every actor would kill to play the Washington Post owner who says, "I'm going to go to jail. I'm publishing the memo and I'm willing to go to jail." And then back in the real world, they say, "Oh, no, no, no. You people out there, you don't need to know this. It could greatly imperil all our shadowy deep state bureaucracies if you were to see this memo." There's a kind of conflict there in the modern democratic.
So democracy dies in darkness, but not in this specific case. Is there, and you've covered a lot of national security stories for decades, I've read them, do you think there are legitimate reasons to withhold this memo from public view?
I don't think so, because we live in leaky times. And so far, we've had an investigation about supposed Russian government interference in the US election, for which there is very minimal evidence. Whereas in the course of the investigation, a lot of evidence has emerged about American government interference in the election, which ought to be a lot more concerning. And we have seen texts, we've seen emails, reports of meetings, phrases that are prima facie suspicious, such as insurance policy, and the idea that the whole thing is one big massive fruit of the poisonous tree being a memo that was paid for by the Democrats with input from the Russians purely for the purpose of enabling the party in government to spy on its political opponents. That's the scandal. That's why the American people are entitled to see the memo.
If this memo were not released, and I think that it will be imminently, but let's say it weren't released and the supporting documents remain cloaked under their classified status, wouldn't that abet the most destructive kind of distrust in government and conspiracy theories and exactly the kind of discourse that really does undermine a country, it seems to me? I mean, sunlight really is needed here.
Well, yes. I mean, you look at it. If you were, say, Vladimir Putin, and you wanted to interfere in America's election, what actually serves your purposes more? Trying to find a candidate who will be your stooge, or actually creating conditions where there is a paralyzed relationship between the permanent bureaucracy and the government and massive mistrust of all government institutions. I mean, in effect, the Russia investigation itself is a huge victory for Putin. And I would say one other thing here, too. Yeah. I would say one other thing here, too, Tucker. This investigation isn't where it ought to be right now. Mueller is on the back foot. The FBI is on the back foot. And Trump is actually teaching a lesson here. If you look at what happened to the Bush administration during that disgraceful Scooter Libby investigation a few years ago, where Bush took the high road and steered clear of it, and it was immensely damaging to him. Trump, on the other hand, is saying there is a bigger scandal here, and so far that bigger scandal is outpunching the so-called Russia investigation.
So far, that's right, and I think the memo will shine a lot of light on that in either direction. Mark Steyn, thank you for that. That was interesting.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
We're still awaiting the president's speech. It should begin at any moment. Meantime, Joe diGenova has been around these issues for a long time. He's a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and he joins us in the studio tonight. Joe, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So the first question is a topical one. There have been news reports all day that the FBI director, I don't know if these are true or not, but is threatening to resign.
I hope he does.
So what is that about? Where are these stories coming from? Are they true?
Chris Wray planted these stories himself, but he's trying to show the employees of the FBI and the former agents that he's brave, he's stalwart, he's standing up for them. This is nonsensical. If he offers to resign, the president should accept his resignation. This type of behavior by an FBI director is childish, it's immature, and let me say that since August, the Congress has been seeking the documents which are going to be revealed somewhat in the 4-page memorandum, which demonstrate the corruption on the 7th floor of the FBI and at the Department of Justice under Comey and others. It is inconceivable to me that Wray has to turn to a threat of resignation to make himself look good. It displays a lack of leadership, lack of competence, and an inability to understand the times in which you function as a major leader, a leader of an American institution. In addition, it shows an arrogance toward congressional oversight. The notion of going to the Speaker of the House and saying, Mr. Speaker, we really don't want you to publish this memo. What in the name of God is wrong at the top of the FBI?
But on I guess what I'm confused by, like most Americans, I'm always willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the FBI, to law enforcement, to intel agencies. It's my government.
Yes.
I don't understand the rationale. And what makes me nervous, what makes me think it might just be butt covering, is they never explain why the country would be imperiled by the release of the information.
One of the things that's terrible about this is that both Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, have done a miserable job as leaders in explaining why they're doing what they're doing, why they can't do what people want them to do. You know what Chris Wray was arguing for yesterday and today? To remove the names of all the FBI agents and the DOJ people who've broken the law and are going to be revealed in the memorandum.
But on what grounds? I mean, how would the public benefit from the redaction of those names?
They wouldn't, and it's not about the public. This is the arrogance of Wray and Rosenstein. They want to protect the bureaucracy. They want to protect the bureaucracy because they think the institutions are more important than you or I knowing anything, and they think the country cannot survive without them. This is this phony notion that DOJ and the FBI are independent of the executive branch and the President of the United States. It is an insidious concept. They work for the President. He can fire them. He can tell them what to do. That doesn't mean he's going to interfere in an investigation. But the arrogance of Wray and Rosenstein to think that they can defy congressional oversight and ask the Speaker to take out the names of people that have broken the law. Well, how outrageous.
So what do you make of the argument from the left? I'm speaking now of the whole left, every red-faced talk show host and phony pundit on cable news yapping away, that to ask questions like the ones you're asking demonstrates a lack of respect for law enforcement. You don't appreciate the work they do, the risks they take. You're basically unpatriotic for wanting to know what your government is doing.
Yeah, well, let me just say this. I've been a federal prosecutor and an investigator for more than 30 years. I've had my family threatened by drug dealers and terrorists. This is nonsensical. We all respect the street agents. We respect the prosecutors at the career level of the Justice Department. What we are talking about here is criticism of political appointees at the FBI and political appointees at the Department of Justice. This has nothing to do with the street agents. The arguments of the left are phony arguments designed to make it look like people like me, who are critical of the FBI in this situation, are critical of everyone. That's nonsense.
So when Joan Walsh on CNN suggests that you're unpatriotic for asking questions about what your government is doing, you don't feel unpatriotic, is what you're saying?
No, actually, it's not a question of patriotism. As an old U.S. attorney, I don't like dirty cops. And the 7th floor of the FBI is full of them, and the upper echelon of the DOJ under Obama was full of dirty cops. And look what they did. They threw a case against Hillary Clinton like a bunch of lousy 1930s prize fighters for $500, and they tried to frame Donald Trump with a created crime.
Seems like our patriotic duty would be to untangle the mess, find out what happened.
Let's find out what happened. Let's unseal the memo.
Amen. Joe, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Stirring and true, I thought. We're still waiting on the president's remarks from the Trump Hotel here in Washington. He's scheduled to begin at any minute. And, of course, we'll bring you there as soon as he does. We'll break into the ads if we need to. That's how committed to the news we are. Stay tuned.